Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to part 14 for our Godot Action RPG series. In this video, we're going to add a stats node to our enemy, and we'll see how much we can get in after that. So let's come into our world scene here, and we'll click on our bat enemy to open up that scene. Click 2D so we can see it here. And we need to add some stats to this bat. And in a similar way that we have with our hurt box, we're going to be adding in a stats node that can be reused across multiple enemies. So whenever you want to give an enemy some stats, you can just instance the stats scene on the enemy. And so we're going to create a new scene here, and we'll do other, and we'll do type node like this, and call this stats. Save, and we can save this in music and sounds. Let's see, where do we want to save this? We'll just save it out here. Well, yeah, we'll save it out here. Okay. Didn't really like that very much for some reason. We'll just clear output. And we'll give this a script called stats. Perfect. And we're going to give our stats. Why doesn't it like it very much? We're getting attached script. Every time I save, it's mad at me for something. But that's an editor issue. It's in here for some reason. It doesn't like where we put our stats here. But that's an editor issue. It's not actually an issue from running the game. So we'll just ignore that for now. And if I figure it out later, then we'll see. So let's come into our stats here and we need to give some properties to our stats object, right? So we're going to give it, we'll just give it a variable called max health. We'll set this equal to 1 by default, and then we'll do a variable called health, and we'll set this equal to max health. Okay. Oh, we want to give it var here at the start. And then we save. We're still getting that. And let's close out of this, come into our bat. We can now click on our bat and click the little instance icon up here and search for stats and instance our stats on the bat, right? Well, now the bat needs access to these stats. So we can come into our bat script up here, and we can say on ready var stats equals stats. And there we go. Now our bat has access to the stats. But our stats object, we only have 1 health here, right? Let's open up this scene. We only have 1 health, and we can't actually set that. So if you were to instance this on every enemy in your game, every single enemy would have only 1 health, and that's not what we want, right? We want to be able to set the stats of our enemy when we attach the stats to that enemy. So the way we can do this is using the export var. So if we come into max health, we can type export like this and save. We're still getting that issue, but we'll ignore it for now. And if you come into your stats node right here, now you can see there's this new thing called script variables, and we can see our max health right here. And we're able to alter this value right here in the editor. We're able to alter the max health value. So if we come back into our bat, we can actually set the stats on the bat, the max health, to be 3 on this bat. But if you were to instance this in another bat, then you could set it to have its own max health amount. You can easily set the max health for your different enemies using that. And you can get a little bit fancier with the export by telling it what kind of thing you're going to have. So we could do an int here, although this type is already inferred. It's already guessing that we want an int because we have a 1 here, right? But you could specifically tell it, like if we made this a float right here, then our variable right here doesn't have the little arrows on the side anymore, and we can put in like 1.5. Whereas before, when it's an int, we save, you can't do 1.5. It just rounds it, and you have the little arrows here so you can switch between them. So for this, we probably do want an int, and so we can leave that there. And I also want to show here real quick, if you Google search GD script and you go to the documentation, okay, this page right here, I love this page. This page is amazing. GD script basics. If you've learned a previous programming language, then this page will be your go-to reference for anything that you want to learn how to do. Want to learn how to loop? Well, you can find that in here. You want to learn how exports work? Do Control F, type exports, and you can come down here to exports, and you can see all the different kinds of things that you can export. Oh, there's a GD script exports page now. Did not know that. We can go there, and then you can learn about all the different ways you can export stuff. And there's a ton of different ways that you can export things. I highly recommend reading this and learning about the different options that you have, because it's a really powerful way to manage your game. So if we come into our player again, remember our player, instead of having these constants up here, we could make them all exported variables. So export var, and we could make them all exported. You can't do exported constants, I don't think. So then when we're inside of our player, you can actually change the acceleration, max speed, roll speed, and friction all right here in the editor. And you can do it while the game is running. So let's say you're playing the game right here. You're playing it, your run speed is like, oh, well, 80 feels a little too slow. Let's set it to 200. That's definitely a better run speed. Now our character is running at a run speed of 200 right here in editor. And if you close out of this, it saves your previous one. Of course, you can hit this little thing to set it back to the default value, which is what it is in here. But yeah, you could update these while the game is running and see those changes immediately in the game. So that's really helpful for polishing your game, because games often need more polish to them, like with, your speeds and testing all of that stuff, making sure that it all feels really good, right? Game feel, that's what everyone talks about. And so it's important to be able to change that on the fly really quickly. You can expose these variables in the editor and then edit them while the game is running and see the updates immediately. So really cool. So once we have that for our stats, then we can come into our bat here, and let's set the bat stats to, we'll do 2 health for now. The bat has 2 health. We can come into here, and in our ready, so function ready, for our bat, we'll do print stats.maxHealth, okay? And then we'll do print stats.health. And save. And then run the game, and we're gonna get it to print down in below, right? Well, you can see our max health is 2, that's what we'd expect, but our health is only 1. So the bats only have 1 health right now. But we're setting our health equal to our max health. So what's going on here? Why isn't that working? Well, apparently when we get this right here, it's actually getting this default value. The value that you give it in the editor is only updated on ready, is the best I can understand here. So basically we're getting the default value set here, and then it updates max health to be whatever we set it in here. So to fix this solution, you could do a ready function. So you could say function ready, right? Health equals max health. But I found that why not use the onReady var? And this seems to work. So it's a little bit weird, not gonna lie, to do this, but this is the solution that I found, and it works for me. When you run the game, you can see that now our max health and our health are set up properly, and we should be good to go. So now our bats have a health, right? They've got their health stats, but how do we actually access those stats? Well, we've got access to the stats right here. So when we take damage, right? When our hurt box gets hit right here, we can say stats.health minus equals 1, and then we can say print stats.health, just so we can see that health value. So we come to our bat, hit the bat, you can see now it only has 1 health. Hit it again, you can see now it has 0 health. Okay, but it's not dying, right? So one thing you could do is you could say, okay, well, if stats.health is less than or equal to 0, Q free, right? Now, when we hit our bat twice, our bat will die. However, I don't recommend this method. So in Godot, generally, when you're trying to access something else, there's kind of a saying within the Godot community, which is you call down and signal up. So what does that mean? Well, our bat here is when it needs to set the health right here, that is actually on a node that is a child of it, right? Stats is a child of bat. So that means we're going down the tree. We're going down the tree. If you're going down the tree, you want to call. So you want to have a function call. Or here we're just setting a property. You could make a function called set health and call it here and subtract, and that might be what you want to do. But for now, we'll just set the property. So you call down, call a function whenever you're going down. But when you're going up, right here, when we're checking the value of health, this is actually going up. Our stats is actually telling our bat something, right? This is our bat telling our stats to do something. This right here is our stats telling the bat something. So whenever you're going up the tree, up the scene tree, you want to use a signal. And so we can create a new signal here, and we'll call this no health. And when you create your own signal inside of a scene, you can see that we now get over here on the right, we get our no health signal. So it actually creates that signal for us in the editor here for our stats. Well, how do we know when we have no health, right? How are we going to know? Well, one solution is to have a process function. You can say if health is less than or equal to 0, emit signal no health, okay? So this is how we emit the signal. We tell it that that's happened, and this would work. This would actually work, but it is not very optimized, right? Why would you want to check your health every single frame and then emit the signal every single frame that you don't have any health? It's just not a good way to do it. Fortunately, in Godot, there is a way that we can do setters and getters. So for our health here, we can type a keyword after our variable here called setget. And then you need to pass it a setter function and a getter function. Now in this case, we don't actually need a getter function, so we can just ignore it. So we'll tell it a setter function. And this tells Godot we want to use this function every time this variable gets set. Okay? Every time health changes. So we'll type out set health, and then we need to make that function. And I usually like to have my functions after my signals. So set health. Now when you're setting the health, you obviously are taking in some sort of a value to set that health to. So we'll call this value. And then we can say health equals value. And you want to make sure you actually do that. So what has changed here? Well, the only thing that's actually changed here now is that we have this setter function, and we also have set health right here. So this now, whenever somebody sets the health of this stats, so for example, when we do stats.health minus equals 1, this function, even though we're not calling the function right here, it actually calls the function under the hood. And so we're basically coming into our setter function right here and doing something. So we could actually we could just say hi to show you that this is working, okay? So you can believe me. Now, whenever the health of the bat gets set, it will say hi. And you can see whenever we attack the bat, that's when its health is getting set. So, but instead of saying hi, it would be so much better for every time we set the health to check for our no health. So we could say if health is less than or equal to 0, emit signal no health. So now we can set our, whenever our health gets set and it ends up being less than 0, then we can emit the signal we don't actually have any health left. So then we can come into here and we can get rid of this right here and erase that, because in order to help with our good coupling, we want to call down and signal up. So let's signal up. Let's come into our stats here, double click on no health, click on the bat, connect, and then we can easily just say queue free here. And make sure you have this little green thing over by the callback function here, or else your signal's not actually connected. So now we're calling down, right? Setting it down. But whenever our health is actually less than 0, we signal up and we say, oh, we don't have any health. Now there's some benefits to this too, because there's less coupling. So for example, if you attach these stats to a certain enemy, let's say you have a boss that has 3 phases or whatever, okay? If you have your stats set up this way, then when you signal up saying no health, you can actually have the boss go into its next phase instead of just destroying itself. So you get to choose, the bat or the enemy itself gets to choose what happens when its health runs out. For this case, we want to just do queue free. So it's working like it did before with our bat health, but we're signaling up. We're calling down and signaling up. Okay? Currently, we also have an issue where our sword always does the same amount of damage, right? So we're going to get into a little bit of inheritance here. So let's open up our, let's open up our, this is when an area has entered and we get hurtbox area entered. We get access to the area that collided with it. So this is our hitbox essentially right here, right? So if we come into our overlap, come into overlap here, come into your hitbox scene, we're actually going to attach a script to this, okay? Attach a script. Well, before we attach a script, let's come into our player. Let's come into our sword hurtbox here. And we created a sword hitbox script for our player. So we're going to do, I don't know how Godot is going to handle this if we create a script on the parent. So we're just going to come into scripts down here and we're going to do clear. We'll attach that back again later. So that's going to break it, but we'll attach it again later. Let's attach a script to our hitbox here. Create script. And inside of this script, we'll make our classic export var. And we'll call this damage. And we'll set it equal to 1 by default. Okay? So now, whenever we attach a hitbox to something, we can give it a damage value so that that hitbox has a specific amount of damage. Okay? And we can come back into our player here, and you can see now our sword hitbox has that script. Well, we don't want it to have that script. We want it to have the other one still. So we want to come down here to scripts. And like I said, the reason I removed it before is because I wasn't sure how it would affect it down here. We want to come back into scripts. We can actually just come into our player, grab the sword hitbox.gd and drag it up here and drop it. So now we have sword hitbox.gd attached to our player's sword hitbox. But now we can't set the damage on this player. So what we want to do is, instead of extending area 2D right here, we can actually make our sword hitbox extend or inherit from the hitbox.gd. And so we'll do that. We'll say extends, get rid of that, and then you can click on hitbox.gd, drag it, drop it right up here. And now our sword hitbox extends our hitbox.gd. So it inherits from it. And that means it will inherit the variables from it. If we click on our sword hitbox, now we have a damage amount that we can set it to. We can set our sword hitbox to 2 damage if we want now. And since the bats only have 2 health, it will only take 1 hit now to kill the bats. Except that it doesn't, right? That didn't work. Why didn't it work? It's because I forgot a step, which is we have to come into the bat, we have to come into here, and instead of saying stats.health minus equals 1, we have to do stats.health minus equals area.damage. Because this is our hitbox, we've got to get its damage. But once we've set that up, now it should only take 1 hit to kill the bats. And this is one of the benefits of having a hitbox hurtbox system like this, is that you can, whenever you attach a hurtbox to a new enemy, then, or not a hurtbox, whenever you attach a new hitbox to an enemy, you can easily set its damage variable here, and it will automatically work whenever it hits a hurtbox. Okay, so that's that set up now. So now our bats have a stats, and the bats have stats, and our hitboxes now have a damage amount. The bats can die. I'm going to change the player's hit damage back down to 1. Maybe you can have an upgraded sword later that deals 2 damage or whatever, and you could up this value on your sword hitbox in code. But for now, I want it to be 1. And that's going to be it for this video. So it doesn't feel like we did a lot, but we did learn a lot. We learned about export variables. We learned about inheritance in Godot, where we have our player's sword hitbox here inheriting from the other hitbox script. So you learned about inheriting right there. And you learned about using the setter and getter functions as well. And those are in the documentation as well. The documentation explains them very well too. So I recommend looking up setters and getters in the documentation. And once again, I'll link to that documentation page that I talked about before. So we learned a lot. And we got our stats working for the bats, and the bats can now die. So thank you for watching this video. It is made possible by my 1-Bit Godot course Kickstarter backers. I want to thank them. They're the ones who made this possible for everyone, so it can be free here on YouTube. And if you want to check out that course, there'll be a link in the description. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and I will talk to you all later.